So this is a demonstration of the KPI scoreboard module of ShireSystem, which basically stands for Key Performance Indicators, and they are measures or targets that help organizations assess and demonstrate how they are carrying out their maintenance. So the scoreboard comes with two elements, so the actual visual scoreboard and also a KPI reporting section. Now, there are 22 types of KPI in the system. They are broken down into a number of groups. So we have date KPIs, ratio KPIs, KPI totals, and also bad actors. So they are predetermined in the system. You are not able to add your own KPIs, but you are able to filter and adjust how those ones report. So if we start with what the system looks like, so the KPI scoreboard is this archery scoreboard icon. If we click into that, when purchased, the scoreboard does come blank, so it will look exactly like this. And then what you need to do is you need to go in and build that. So before we do that, just to make you aware, you can obviously adjust the zoom. It is set at the sort of optimum level, so really you're best to leave it like that. And then you do have the option of a help files. Now that help files will give you how to create a KPI gauge, a KPI grid, and a bad actor KPI. That's the three options that you have on the scoreboard. And then you also have the formulae for how the KPIs are calculated, which is quite useful before you start. So to start, you have to click edit to begin. That will then take you into this screen here, and I'll just work through the three different options now. So with a KPI grid, the same options you have with the KPI grid are the same ones that you have with the KPI gauge. Grids, you can have multiple grids and you are able to rename them. So they're very useful if you're wanting to compare, say, a night shift or a day shift on the same filters. So something like work orders completed, that would be the best option in that scenario. So if I drag one of these over for you, if I go in and hit edit group, I'm able to rename this. So let's do that. Let's say this is day shift, and we will do, for this KPI, we will do work orders completed. You'll see that the name is then copied. You can go in and change that if you want to. And then you have an option of what time scale do you want to look at, day, week, month, quarter, or year. Now that does, if you choose year or quarter, just to be aware, it does start in January. So it doesn't go back a whole calendar year from now. It will go back to the start of the 1st of January and we'll begin from there. So let's do year. Now you'll see that you've got multiple filters that you can apply. Obviously, most of them are self-explanatory: system, location, work type, who it's assigned to, etc. You do also have the option to set targets and limits. Now, if you do that, if you choose increase, which is the one that's set as a default, any high values will be recorded with a green arrow showing that you are you're positive, your performance is positive, it's increasing. If you set that to decrease instead, high results are then recorded in a red with an arrow pointing downwards, just to say that your performance is adverse, you're not performing that well. If it is in black, that just shows that there's been no change since the last period, and it will use the last period as the thing that it reports back on. So if you're doing better than last month or last year, it will show. If you're doing worse, it will show. Then you've also got the option of excluding work types. So you can filter on a work type here, but obviously in a lot of cases you need to exclude work types. So obviously this is the better way of doing it. So once I'm happy with that and I save it, because I haven't added any other filters, that will take into account everything in my system, all work orders. So I can see that our work orders completed, the total is 339, which is 722 work orders worse than last year. If I need to edit that, I can with this little pencil icon. If I need to go in and actually do analysis on that, so if I want to see the raw data behind it, we do have an option where you can hover over the name, which is a hyperlink. You click into that and it takes you into 4 tabs called the KPI history. Now, because I haven't set any critical or target limits, it just shows as a blank graph. Now, if I go back in and say that our critical limit is 300 and our target limit is 500, and then save it, and then go into it, you'll see that it shows on the graph. So my target is the green, my critical is in the pink. Then you've also got the statistics. So quite useful if people are asking you for these things, the mean, the trend, things like that. And then you have 2 really useful tabs. So the breakdown will show you what work orders have been used to give you that result. So we can see here the 339 for this year, and then it will show you the historic years as well. So 2019, 2018, so on and so forth. If I then needed to export those into a spreadsheet, I can click on the hyperlink in blue. That then puts them into a table where I'm able to export them into Excel. I am also able to print the graph if I need to. So if I click on print KPI details, it will bring up the graph for me in a PDF format. And then on about, you have the formulae to give you that KPI. So on work orders completed, it's nice and straightforward. On others, it's maybe not as straightforward. So because that's a grid, I would then be able to go in and technically do exactly the same ones again. And in these ones, I could do it for my night shift, and I could filter on just the nighttime engineers or the team, or maybe a different location. Now, with the KPIs, when you click into them, you do have a tick box that says, do you want to allow this KPI to be exported to other users? That is useful if you want to have consistency on your scoreboards, because every login to the main system will have a scoreboard option. So if I set my scoreboard up and I tick every one of the KPI boxes I select, that means that my colleague can come in, and instead of having to go and build all of the same things using the same filters and parameters, they have an option to then import the ones that I have already created. So that can be really, really useful. So we could then technically have our night shift and our day shift looking at the same thing, and we could have that as a comparison. And then obviously filter on different trades, or as I said, different teams, whatever we decide to filter on. So in this scenario, they're exactly the same. So obviously the results are the same. Now, with the KPI gauges, you do have a slight difference with those. So the gauges are obviously more like a speedometer. You can have it in a digital format. You can have it in a traffic light format. There's lots of different ones that we can do with the gauge. You have the same 22 options with the KPIs. So if you take away the 4 bad actor KPIs, you actually have 18 options that you can use for gauges and for grids. So with this one, let's say we're going to go for our mean time to repair. And again, we'll do that over the year. Now, again, we could set a target limit if we want to, but we won't on this one. We'll just save it. So that's given me my figure. So my mean time to restoration is 3,507 hours, 44 minutes. I can then go in and change how the gauge looks, and I can also change the highest and the lowest value. So it will set to 0 as the lowest and 100 as the highest, but you may want to have that as something completely different. You may want to set the highest as 75 or 50 or whatever you decide. So I'm going to go into our gauge types, and I'm going to choose traffic light system and save. So nice, easy visual guide there that a green light means we're doing well and that we're performing better than we did last year. So that's fantastic. If I click into the gauge, I get the same KPI history options. So with this one, the formulae would be a bit more complicated. So it would give it to me there if I needed to explain it to anyone. And also the work orders. So of the 25 work orders used in this calculation, this is how many minutes have been recorded against them. Again, if I want to then export those so I can actually look into the work orders themselves, I can into Excel, or I can print the gauge. So that's the gauges and the grids. Now the bad actor KPIs, you only have 4 options with those. So you have worst offender by cost, worst offender by downtime, worst offender by number of incidents, and worst offender by labour hours. So let's say we're going to look at our worst offending asset by cost over the year. So this is telling me that my forklift truck number 1 has cost me £2,282.98 in maintenance this year so far. Now you get a slightly different analysis with the bad actors. You have to click into the section. So I would have to click into the blue section here. That will then give me a drill down on that period, which you can change. The mean time between failure, the mean time to restoration, number of incidents, uptime, total cost, and the number of KPI available hours. Now, the KPI available hours, they can be set at 3 different places. So you can have them at asset level, location level, or system level. And if you don't put anything into any of those, the KPI scoreboard will assume that your site runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and never closes. So the figures will be inaccurate. So most people will then go in and choose either asset level, location level, or system level. Now, if you don't have KPI business hours at asset level, it will use the next logical one. It will say, well, we'll use the location one. If there is none set at location, it will use the system-wide one. If there is nothing on the system-wide one, as I say, it will assume you're open all the time. So you have to set those for the KPI to be accurate and to be recording accurate numbers. Now, with the bad actors, you also get to see what the fault causes, fault groups, and fault areas are, assuming the engineers are using those when they sign jobs off. So it is quite a handy area of the system to see what your actual breakdowns are and what areas they are. So you may need to repair a certain area of a machine instead of replacing the whole machine. Now, the only other parts you need to be aware of is the settings. You can then exclude work types across the board using the settings. Obviously, you can have as many gauges or grids as you like. It will just allow you to keep adding them until you can add no more. That will depend on what variation you use. Obviously, the grids are a lot smaller, so you will be able to do more of those than you would bad actors and gauges. You do have a refresh button, so it doesn't automatically refresh. You do need to click into that maybe every day or every half a day just to get the most up-to-date records. Obviously, our import button I looked at earlier, if I wanted to use some KPIs that some of my colleagues have set up on theirs, I can go in and choose those. And then once you're happy with what you've got, you hit view, and that will then set that scoreboard for you as such. Now, lots of people do have this on a big television somewhere in their manufacturing area or in their warehouse, just so they can constantly monitor their performance. Now, I did mention that there are also 22 KPI reports which live within the reporting section here. They are the same options, but sometimes it's better to put the figures into a report. Sometimes it's better to put them into the actual physical scoreboard. So they go together, they work alongside each other, and with both of them, you will generally have pretty much everything that you need to monitor your performance.